Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. Today is a different day. It's a special day. As you know, I have kind of two forms of this podcast. I've got Expedition Networking, is where I get people to come on and share their stories of how networking has served them. And then I also have the regular podcast where I'll just get at the regular interview where I'll get people on and they'll be talking about things that can help us. Today, it's the 500th episode. Wow, it's gone fast. But I've got Dan Horowitz on, and Dan's kind of like a hybrid. He's got a great story, but he's also a prolific connector. And I have had a couple of great conversations with him about just networking, how to make it all work. So he kind of fits in both. So we're just going to jump in with it. Dan, welcome to the program. Just quickly to introduce you, for those who don't know, he's the president of Direct Camp IT conferences. You put on conferences for IT people. Sounds fascinating. A lot of people, I just envision all these introverts, but they're probably not.
And thank you, Frank. I'm thrilled to be here. Yeah, I run Camp IT conferences, second generation IT conference business. We've been doing it for 38 years in Chicago and went virtual 2 years ago. Now we do both on-site and virtual offerings.
So has that exploded you outside of Chicago?
Yes. It's interesting. All of our events are in Chicago, but we would always attract attendees for our 1 and 2 day events from across the Midwest and outside. But the virtual opportunity, when everything hit with the pandemic 2 years ago, we had this huge database that we just weren't marketing to. And that brought in people from around the world, from I think it's almost 20 countries. That have been joining us for the past couple of years. So it presented an opportunity just to really expand the community and find ways to help one another.
That's great. I mean, and we could certainly touch on that. I love the positive stories, people who took the the COVID lockdown and really took that lemon and made lemonade. But where I want to kick off is I really would love for you, if you would, to share the story of why you are such a prolific connector, why you are so passionate about really just helping other people there's no sense of, hey, what's in it for me? You connected me with Jeff Lord, shout out to Jeff Lord, and just knew we would hit it off, and we did. I mean, we're kindred spirits. So, but where does this come from? And I think that's a great for our 500th episode. So please.
Thank you, Frank. So yeah, I think I've always been into networking, just trying to help folks. I don't say it boastfully. It's something I've always been. It's just, it's either, I think with a lot of folks, it's either in their DNA or not. But going back and really sort of looking at my family history, I can understand now where it came from. So roughly 5 years ago, sitting down with my father and brother for a guy's night out for burgers in the northern suburbs of Chicago. My father looks at my brother and says, "Hey, you tell Danny what we found?" And my brother said, "No." And I said, "Tell him." My brother said, "Do you remember that suitcase Grandma and Grandpa had when we were growing up?" And I said, "I do." He said, "Do you know what was in it?" And I said, "No." He said, "It was sitting in Mom and Dad's crawl space for the last 30 years. No one looked at it for some reason. Our mother goes out one Saturday afternoon. My brother runs over, opened up the crawl space, the suitcase, all the original letters our grandfather wrote to escape the Holocaust he saved. And it was really due to the kindness of a stranger who received a letter from my grandfather in December, I'd say early part of 1938. They became pen pals. My grandfather asked him to really, and he had to be sort of cryptic about it, but asked him to rescue him. The gentleman said yes. Then on a follow-up letter, he said no. And my grandfather pushed again and said, "Hey, if you don't do this, I really have, it's my last resort." So the gentleman, Harry Rosenfeld in Chicago, agreed, rescued my grandfather, brought him to Chicago, introduced him to my grandmother. The reason I tell the story is it's the power of one, the kindness of one individual who had to put a lot on the line, both financially, personally, professionally, emotionally, rescued my grandfather, brought him to Chicago, introduced him to my grandmother. Now there are 3 generations that are currently present. If this didn't happen in 1938, I don't exist. My daughters, my nephews, my brother, my mother, all of us. So that one random act changed the whole trajectory of my grandfather's life. And now there are these generations that are present. So then taking that to common day, it's in my DNA. I have to help others because I can't repay those individuals because they're long gone. So I can only pay it back by paying it forward, because you never know when you can help someone else put food on the table, get a new job, find a physician for them. You just don't know.
Yeah, it's I was sharing this story with my wife this morning. She asked what I had going, and I explained that I had this podcast interview and told the story to her. And I said, you have to understand, there is no email, there is no airmail. These letters are going on ships back and forth, and it's like hitting send and waiting 20 days to get a response. That must have been just painfully agonizing.
Compared to today, yes.
Yeah.
Right? But back
Yeah.
then, they didn't know. And the other part of it was my grandfather and 2 nephews that survived. His mother passed away before the war, but everyone else was murdered. And when we look at this, we're in so much more need of kindness, but then that plays into networking, because I always tell people that it doesn't matter what you sell. It really doesn't, because sooner or later that becomes commoditized. But whenever it becomes commoditized is really the relationship. The relationships are unique. And if you put yourself out there and help people with nothing, with no expectation of anything in return, that makes it authentic. Whereas if you don't, if you are doing it just for gain, then it's not, it's something that people will see through. And that's not what you want. And the other part of it is your personal brand is different than your business brand. You want both of them to be equally strong. But if I have to choose one over the other, I want it to be the personal brand. Now, as an entrepreneur, I want them both to be exceptionally strong. But individuals, let's say they're networking, they're working for companies, your brand is unique, and you want to be seen as unique, and you want to be seen as someone who can help.
Yeah. As you were talking about, this act of kindness, Harry Rosenfeld, I think you said the name was, is that correct?
Yeah.
This act of kindness, it reminds me of the saying that somebody hit me with. You can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. Meaning you plant that seed and it grows a tree that has apples, and those apples all have seeds, and those seeds create trees, and just goes on and on. And that's literally what's happening with your family, certainly with you. Have you sat and shared this story with you have 2 daughters, I believe. You've shared this story with them?
Yes. So when we found these archives, my brother had an agreement with the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., brought all the documents to them. So now they're apparently on display there, but we all got photocopies of everything.
Okay.
So other family members that aren't blood related, like my wife's family, they've seen it and they were just blown away by it. Friends of ours have seen it. My daughters have seen it. And I always say that, it's like what Maya Angelou said, right? People are going to forget what what you may have said to them, but they're never going to forget, I'm paraphrasing it, how you made them feel. In every interaction as networkers, we have to touch people. So in the case of my daughters, they're seeing that this was their great grandfather. And my nephews, they're seeing again, this is their great grandfather. And they now understand, because my wife Jamie and I are really instilling in them, they have a responsibility to make a difference in this world. You have to think outwardly, not inwardly. And if you think outwardly and you connect with other folks and you help them move the needle forward, it does come back, but there is a subtlety to this. You don't do it because it comes back. The byproduct is it comes back. A lot of people who will network will say, I'm going to do this, and do this, because it's going to come back to me. But then that's still transaction oriented. To me, it's more, you put enough out there, will it come back? Sure. But your sole reason should be just to put enough out there, just to help others. But positivity breeds positivity, just like negativity, you could say the same thing. So by doing that, when you're instilling these values in your children, or you have colleagues that are seeing your whole thought process on connecting and networking with others, that's inspiring. And then they want to be a part of something like that. I was on a call, as I mentioned earlier, Frank, that with another gentleman earlier today, who said that my family's story in the presentation that I've given about it and about paying it forward inspired him to do the same with his family that came here. And that resonates, that helps people. There's another gentleman that I connected with who I believe is out east, who had said the same thing, that he's been sharing the story I provide to him. And it's not about him sharing my story. It's the point of the message that's getting across, that the more you help others, it has this domino effect where other people want to be part of it. And I would say the last 2 years have been so extraordinarily difficult for so many people that kindness and empathy are more important than ever. And you can see this on LinkedIn where people are talking about this all the time. And some people, talk the talk. They may not walk the walk, but they talk about it because to some it's something that's in vogue. But through the history of time, the more people you help, the more people want to be part of it. They get inspired to help people. There's a story that a gentleman who I met a few years ago, and it said to me, after we'd met, maybe 9 months to a year later, he called me up and said, "Hey, I just need to say thank you for something." I said, "For what?" He said, "Well, I became chief revenue officer at this organization. It's because of you." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you introduced, in this case, Jeff Lord, who, our mutual friend.
Sure. Yeah.
This organization needed a CRO. I was in a tough place. Jeff connected me with him. So I have to say thank you." I said, "Well, I wasn't the one who made the introduction on your behalf." He said, "It doesn't matter. You set this in motion, not knowing that you were the genesis of this." And I thought, well, that was interesting. And he said to me, "Now you can go home tonight knowing you helped an older guy put food on the table." And, I got kind of teary-eyed about that because it's the joy of the game. When you help others, it's different than, let's say, monetary wealth. It's emotional wealth. It's relationship wealth.
Yeah.
When people talk about your net worth is based on your network, well, folks are going to remember who was there from them in a difficult time. And they may or may not be able to help you, but when they spread the good word about what you've done, other people want to become part of it. As an entrepreneur, I'm living proof of that.
Yeah. I mean, money can only be spent once, right? You spend it, it's gone. I mean, you can make more money, I get it, but it can only be spent once. But introductions and kindness, you can be kind. You did that, introducing to Jeff. That didn't deplete you in the least.
No.
Maybe a little bit of your time. You can go on and arguably are better at doing it.
Here's a trick that I will tell people. If you want to network, craft an email like I do, save it as a message in Outlook, and then just open it up and just change the names. Two great folks that know the power of networking.
Yeah.
That takes you all 30 seconds. All you have to do is type in their email addresses. You've already got the subject line. Taking that effort, does it take some time to there's some weeks where I'm doing 30 or 40 introductions for people. Some weeks even more, but I have that canned email right there. It makes it easy. And the two people I know trust each other. But you're absolutely right, Frank. It's time well spent. It's an investment of time. It's an investment in relationships. It's an investment in the happiness of others. And when you think outwardly and make those deposits, too many people are focused on the withdrawals. I need this. I want this. I got to get this, right? But that happiness sort of plateaus. I call this all the trajectory of happiness. The more you help others, the more you have this feeling, I think if you're human, you have this feeling that you're contributing to someone else's livelihood, their happiness, their family. And that is like, I compare that to compounding interest in a bank account. The more you do it, your happiness compounds. Someone said to me a year and a half ago, "How are things going?" I said, "I'm the happiest I've ever been." And they said, "How can you're in the on-site conference business? How are you the happiest you've ever been? This is a nightmare for you." And I said, "Well, but I've been able to help so many people that it keeps me steady." And yeah, does it build relationships? Sure. But if you help people, they're going to remember it, but you're also slowly but surely making the world a better place for other folks. And a lot of people don't measure that as the ROI. They think of everything as the ROI in terms of what am I going to get out of it? I always say the ROI is what you're going to give, because the more you give, the happier you are. If you have a heart, right?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, before we hit record, you were talking about what it's done for your business. I mean, I think we were all kind of with the lockdown hit. I think we were all, unless you were in government or trucking, food service, we were all kind of reeling. It's like, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? And you defaulted to the thing you do best, and just connecting people. And what has that done for you?
Well, that's a great question. So let me sort of step back. So about 3-4 years ago, if you would have asked me if I believed in karma, I would have said probably not. I don't know. Like how can you believe in the universe when you see all these bad things happening to good people, right? And so I sort of struggled with that mentally and emotionally, and I wasn't sure. And it really, the last 2 years have proven to me that it exists. And here's why: because I'm not someone who's into all this cosmic stuff or whatever it may be, but I made a choice. And when the pandemic came down in early, let's say late February, early March, and I had to pivot the business quickly, I thought, what the best way to do this is to constantly be connecting with people. Now, it was rather fortuitous that we came across the archives of my grandfather's escape. So all these sort of started to build up in my mind as to, all right, I've got a responsibility now, right? People will tell you, and it's for them to say that I'm pretty influential in the Midwest IT market, now maybe nationally as well. But I always view conferences as, at least in my perspective, it's not about a transaction, it's not about events, it's about a community.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is a stakeholder in the community. So if I make my sponsors successful, I make my attendees successful with great thought leadership, business development opportunities for the sponsors. And if people lose their jobs, I connect them with recruiters. You have to be that extension. So I put a hyper focus on that last couple of years, where I saw people are hurting, and I have half a dozen recruiters that I'm tight with, IT recruiters. So when I find people posting that they're looking on LinkedIn, whether or not I know them, I'll message them and say, hey, happy to help. We're all in this together. Message them to recruiters. Do I get anything out of it? No, I get joy out of it. Make a difference. The same thing with the sponsors. So while I was building my virtual events, I took time every day, and still do, to connect with folks, to introduce them to folks. My mind works pretty quickly. I'm fortunate that way, where I can think really quickly, this is going to be potentially a good introduction for someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really the drive behind it, was if I connect these folks, then I build strengthening relationships with them. I'm leaving them, my whole goal every day where I'm in a networking meeting, my whole motto is I've got to leave people in a better place than where they were 30 minutes ago, where I make introductions for them by the end of the day. They know I'm going to make those introductions. Some cases it may be a few days, but when I make those promises, I get those intros done. And then my whole hope is that they'll then introduce people. But by doing this, Frank, the introductions came back to me. Like as you and I are talking, or I should say before we started talking, there were introductions that were landing in my inbox with people who know me, but I have no idea who the other party is, which is how it goes. Wonderful. So by doing that and creating this sort of karmic universe, by introducing these folks, it comes back to you. But you have to take that step in the direction of, I'm going to help as many good people as possible, because the good people will get it. They'll move the forward for others, and then it comes back. So that was really the philosophy behind it.
And as you said, you've got lots of things. You almost can't keep up with it, right? I mean, it's just things are coming at you pretty fast.
Yeah, business is very healthy. I'll tell you that. I certainly don't want to jinx myself, but we probably already booked 40 about almost 50% of our total revenue in 2020 is booked. Now, 2020 was a challenging year.
Sure.
And then we grew profit by 30% last year, both based on the value of the offerings we provide, but also the connections and relationships, because people want to help those that help them, generally speaking. You have a few that don't care, that just want to take the help. And that's maybe a couple percent, if that, of the time, of that whole group. But yeah, I found a lot of opportunities just by moving the needle forward for others. But again, I want to stress that you don't move the needle forward for others just so you get something out of it, because that's too transactional. You move the needle forward for others, you help others even when there's something that's not on the table for you, because that makes it more authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it kind of sits out there, and it's just having faith that it's going to work out in your favor. And I tell people it's not a perfect formula, but it's reliable enough to double down on, right? I mean, it's like blackjack, right? You get a couple aces, right? Okay. Or you get an ace, it's like, all right. Or you get two aces, I guess you can split. It's like, you know what? Chances are I'm going to be okay. I'm all in on this. And that's kind of how I use networking. It can still not work. But
I think it's all, it's interesting. I had a conversation with someone a few years ago, and he said, his comment was, I've stopped networking. And I said, why? And he's someone that I know pretty well. He said, well, I helped so many people and they didn't help me in return. And I said, well, that's when you double down. He said, what do you mean? I said, that's when you put your foot on the gas pedal. He said, I don't understand. I said, because part of it's a numbers game, but part of it is consistency. If you keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, it's going to stick. You can't say I'm going to do it for a few months and the thing is that it's like when people say they go to network meetings and they don't get anything out of it. I mean, you have to keep building those relationships. The way I explain it is, like when people come to my conferences, I've told my sponsors there are 5 things attendees are thinking about. It has nothing to do with you. And they said, what do you mean? Why are we here? I said, just follow my lead. They're thinking about this disagreement they have with their spouse or life partner the night before. They're thinking about getting their kids into college and paying for it. They're thinking about when they can retire, when they can vacation. And sadly, they're thinking about an ill relative. Now, the ill relative thing may be a little more challenging for you to help them solve. But the other 4 things are about upward mobility, putting food on the table, getting their kids to the next phase of their life. Even if there's nothing on the table, help them. Introduce them to people that can help them. Nothing to do with you. Do why? Because then you make yourself indispensable to people. As my friend Larry Kaufman always talks about, you have to make yourself indispensable. And by doing those things, you will do that. Then you create this sphere of influence. And when you create this sphere of influence, people want to come back to you and talk to you further. They want suggestions. They want you to help them. And you have to balance that. Again, when you become that sphere of influence, there always will be takers. That's only, maybe 1% or 2%. So you have to figure that out because that could be, I don't want to say it's a downfall, but that's a trap people get into where they're always helping. So you have to be savvy enough, street smart enough to know that.
Sure.
But people remember, there's a gentleman who, from a leading healthcare organization several years ago, said, I remember several years ago when you had helped me when I was going to be in transition soon and I was still employed and I came to one of your conferences and you helped me. I'll never forget that. Now, this is 7 or 8 years later. He remembered that. Other people, again, are going to remember who was there for them. If they're of the right heart and the right mind, they're going to remember who was there for them during a very challenging time. Someone that maybe lifted their spirits, gave them another idea, helped them get out of a jam. And they're also going to remember the people that tried to either fleece them or just try and sell them something they didn't need, or right after the deal was closed, they never heard from them again. And at the end of the day, people are going to really rather spend time with individuals that were helpful to them versus do they want to spend time with the person that was boasting about their commissioner, telling them they're on the sales leaderboard? Because once the trophies and cars and everything else are gone, what do you have left? Well, hopefully you've got relationships and everything else. And I feel the more people we help, the happier we are. And that's really a much better way of valuing someone's life. In my opinion, there may be some people that disagree with me, but I think the currency in life is how many lives you've touched and made better versus just the absolute how much money someone has, because at the end of the day, that's what people are going to remember.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, you are spot on, and the science tells you you're spot on. They've done a study where they gave people a certain amount of money every day to spend on themselves, and the happiness kind of goes down, right? It's a cup of coffee. A free cup of coffee is nice day 1. Day 2, it's still nice, but as time goes on, it becomes an entitlement. But people who were given money to do something nice for somebody else, that happiness just continued and continued and continued. So there's science behind what you're saying. I guess to kind of wrap up here, Camp IT, how to, looking for sponsors, looking for people. I know you're not here for this thing, but I'm putting you on the spot. How can we help you?
Well, allowing me to help other people is a great opportunity. So if there are people in your audience that need a connection or understand paying it forward or connecting, I'm always happy to help them. So my network is open to folks in your network, Frank. In terms of, because I always like to help before I ask, it's just how I, my whole thought process. Technology vendors that sell to IT organizations and want to get in front of a new audience, I can help them both on-site, virtually. We have a 38-year track record of doing it. IT leaders that want continuing education and want to expand their professional networks, we can certainly help them both with our on-site and virtual offerings. All the education is thought leadership, strategies, and tactics. Many of the sessions presented by IT executives. And people are just looking to expand their network. I'm here to always be a resource.
Great. What's the best?
Yeah, I was going to say, reach me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Or email me, which is just dan@campconferences.com.
Okay.
Those are probably the 2 best ways. All
right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. to be on my 500th episode and really all that you do. I mean, I could devote 3 episodes to just singing your praises, but we'll leave it at 1.
Really
but thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you for your generosity, Frank.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.